So now that we've looked at it, you could think, think to yourself, which is better? Is it better to use the excess cash you have and give it to the shareholders as a dividend, or is it better to do a share repurchase? There's pros and cons to each of those scenarios. So let's look at the pros and cons from the purchase or from the perspective of a repurchase. The pros for the repurchase or the cons for the dividend. The biggest pro is obviously the earnings per share will go up when you do a share repurchase. So that makes shareholders happy when they see that because they're getting a larger portion of the income. The second thing is also that it's optional for the shareholder to participate. They don't need to sell their shares unless they want to. There'll be a taxable event for that, but at least they get to decide, unlike a dividend, which everyone is forced to take and pay taxes on. So that helps from a cash management or taxable situation. The third thing is it still limits the cash available to the manager or the excess cash available to managers. And remember we talked about that was one of the reasons that dividend paying companies outperform is because they don't have excess cash hanging around. So this would still accomplish that goal. And the last and probably most important is that it sends a good signal about the share price. The management of the company is essentially the insiders of the company, and they will only repurchase it when the shares are undervalued. So if they're repurchasing it, it gives you the impression that the management feels the share price is going to go up. Okay, so those are the benefits of doing a share repurchase, but there's some negatives to consider as well. So the first thing relates to the earnings per share. If earnings per share goes up, management can use these repurchases to manipulate earnings per share. Let's suppose they're missing their targets for the year for EPS and they want to increase it. You just go out and do a share repurchase. And maybe shares were not undervalued at the time you did it. Maybe they were fairly valued or worse, overvalued, in which case you made everyone worse off by buying them at too high a price to hide some shortfall on your targets. And the second thing is that the shares or the cash, the excess cash is still gone permanently. That was one of the negatives of a dividend, is once you pay out the cash, it's gone. And if you ever need it back, you have to get other sources of financing. The same thing is the situation. You'd have to reissue equity or take debt in the future. And if you want to talk about like a real life example, Warren Buffett is very, supportive of share repurchases. He has never paid a dividend, doesn't want to pay a dividend. But he will do share repurchases when he has excess cash available. And he feels that the money can be better put to use by repurchasing his shares if they're undervalued at that time. Otherwise, he just hangs on to it for future investment. So he's a prominent investor who's in favor of the repurchase of those two options.